Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Debt Hotline. We're really excited to host a live Q&A today, and we have a really awesome special expert guest, Melinda Carrera, with Credit Street Financial. Melinda has a lot of experience in helping people improve their credit and learn more about credit. She has a really successful TikTok account where she teaches people about credit and what they can do to improve their credit, build their credit, and manage debt in general. And we're really excited to have her on today. Our topic for the day is what stays on my credit report after I settle a debt. So in a minute, we're going to jump into that question. But before we did that, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Hannah Locklear. I'm a part of Team Solo. We help people respond to debt collection lawsuits and resolve their debt through settlement. And like I said, I'm really excited to host this live Q&A today. And Melinda, I wanted to give you a minute to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do. And yeah, let's give you some time to tell us about you.
Okay, so my name is Mel. I've been in the credit space for about going on 6 years now. I really took off during COVID. I feel like everyone just wanted their credit fix, and from there, everybody was just talking about their results because everybody was on social media. So that's kind of how it took off. I once had terrible credit, and it was just a turning point where it took me getting my car repossessed for me to sit down, learn how to fix my credit. And the person who actually taught me was in a transition with his business, and he was actually becoming an educator. And so I learned how to fix credit from now. And now I am actually an educator. So I just pretty much teach people how to fix their own credit using my platform because it is something that can hold you back. It is something that could really like hinder your chances of getting an apartment, a house, a car. It really can affect you, like even sometimes getting a job. So it's just so important to have your credit in a good standing. And a lot of times people just don't understand credit. So I feel like it's my job to tell people about credit and just like all the loopholes there are, because there's so many loopholes and there's so many laws that you have that people just don't know about. So I use my platform mostly on TikTok to let people know that you do not have to be in that forever bad credit situation, because sometimes it could feel daunting. It could feel like you're drowning, and it's not something that has to be looked like that, because I used to think that as well.
Thank you so much. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and drop a link to Melinda's website. It's streetfinancial.net.
Mhm.
And you can go on there, explore, see what you can learn about um, Mel's work and maybe ways that you can improve your own credit. Um, Mel, you mentioned a little bit about how you had your own experience having to rebuild your credit. And I
Mhm.
wanted to dig a little bit deeper. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what got you in that position and exactly maybe if you feel comfortable even sharing numbers, like how much your credit had dropped, where you were at, and then how you were able to rebuild it and how long it took. Could you tell us a little bit more in detail your story?
Absolutely. So it really started, I would say it was the beginning of 2018, New Year's Day. It was December 31st, 2018. I remember my car got repossessed. So I went into 2019 that way. I went into 2019. It's a new year. Everybody has these goals. And I went into the new year not having a car. My credit is just terrible. I'm in this apartment that I do not like, and I had to make a change. I contacted a friend that I knew that was doing credit repair, and at that time he was actually like, I'm not doing it anymore, I'm teaching credit repair now, but since I don't have any students, I'd love for you to be my guinea pig. So it literally worked out. I actually fell in love with it because I have a long background of finance. I used to work in major banks for 10 years prior to that. So even though I worked at large institutions, I still didn't have the proper knowledge on I didn't really have the knowledge of credit. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't understand the loopholes. And so once I got with him, I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with, wow, like I have this right. I can say that um, because it was something that was already paid. So if it's paid, it doesn't necessarily have to be on my credit, but it's affecting my credit. And this repossession that's on my credit, well, I don't have to pay the it was like 14,000 that I said I owed. I don't have to pay this 14,000. Like 6,000 of this is fees. So let's negotiate this debt and then get this off my credit. So now that I can move forward with my life. So it's just like a lot of negotiating that I didn't know that I had the power to do. And that's really what got me into that. But my numbers were like, I don't have the exact number, but it was for sure in the low 500s. That's how low it got. And what I tried to do was try to get another car, but I couldn't get another car without, it was like crazy. Like I was getting charged like, I think they wanted like 700 for like a Honda Civic. And it was like, I'm not paying that. I'm not going to do that. I'd rather just not have a car and I'll just work on my credit. And so the money, the amount of money that I'm able to save having good credit, the amount of opportunities I have being able to have good credit, it's just a whole different world. And it's like it didn't take me as long as people say. A lot of people say it takes years and years. It doesn't necessarily take years and years. It could take one conversation sometimes and 30 days to update. It could take you going on an app. It's 2025 now. They have credit building apps. So there's certain apps you can use right now that will build your credit. So if you're in, depending on where your credit is at, if you're somebody who has bad credit and it's been holding you back, it can, I would say on an average, about 3 to 4 months if you were to actively work on it. But sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's a little bit slower. But for you to be able to, get a new car, whatever it is, I would say about 3 to 4 months.
So it sounds like there were a lot of things that you did to help your situation, but not one of those big things was that you negotiated the debt down to where you could actually afford to make the payments, and
Mm-hmm.
then you got back on track, and then from there you were able to rebuild your credit. Is that right?
Correct. And I did when I first got when I got my new car, my interest rate was pretty high, but I was still working on my credit. So shortly after I did a refinance with a good bank and it there's, sometimes it's like that. Like if you really need a car, you might be paying a high amount, but I do not recommend paying a high interest rate for too long because that eats up your money that you can have available to yourself or your family.
Yeah. So what was it like negotiating the debt? Because I think you said that they came after you for like $6,000. Is that right?
Yeah, it was like in fees. And it's just really like telling them, like, hey, I will pay this to get this to be done with it. And a lot of times they will work with you, but a lot of people don't know. So what you don't know is going to be used against you. So if you're not making the call, then you're not going to be able to get, any sort of like kickback or not kickback, but any sort of deduction.
Mhm.
So you have to negotiate. You have to have your voice when it comes to credit, finances, all of that. You have to use your voice. And if you really are wanting to have that off your credit report, you once it's paid off, you can ask for it to be removed from your credit report. The power that you have over your credit report, a lot of people don't even realize like it's unbelievable. Like you have a lot of say so over your credit report.
Yeah. And I think that's a key point that we try to emphasize at Solo too is if you're facing debt struggles and you feel like overwhelmed by it, like you're drowning in debt,
Hmm.
you have options, but the key is to be proactive and assertive and communicate. And it sounds like in your situation, Mel, that's exactly what you did. They were coming after you for a debt, they repossessed your car, and then you proactively reached out and said, "Hey, this is what I can afford." And you kind of took those steps to initiate, negotiate, and then you're able to rebuild from there. So I think
Correct.
that's a really important lesson to take away is like if you're struggling with debt, you don't have to stay struggling. Like if you are proactive and communicate clearly, there are options and there are ways out. So
Most times they want to work with you.
yeah,
Like they are, it's very rare that it's just a hard no. Most times, if you're really trying to get out of a situation or if you're trying to make things better, they will work with you. But a lot of people don't make that first step to call because they just think like, oh, this is it. I owe $16,000. Well, you have to look. 6,000 of that is fees, so 10,000 you owe.
yeah. Well, I love you. All right. I love that story. And thank you so much for sharing. I think it's really important to hear like real life stories because it just makes it feel more relatable. And yeah, I think it's a reminder that that you don't have to stay in those hard situations. You can
Hmm.
get out if you are proactive. Um, I wanted to ask you the topic of today's, Q&A, which is how long or what will stay on your credit report after you have settled a debt? Do you have any advice or any tips or any information about what actually stays on your credit when you settle your debt? Because it sounds like you've been through it.
Yeah, so typically, if you settle the debt, the account itself most times does stay on. It will either say settled, paid for a lesser amount, something in that sort. Paid for less than full balance or something in those terms. If there's late payments, those may be recorded, but typically it will have the account and the status always. So either settled, paid for, or paid for less. So when it's closed out like that, you could then call the bureaus and say that you want this off your credit report. Because when you have something on your credit report and it shows that it was settled or was paid for less, then it's not necessarily attractive on your credit report. So the whole thing is to really make your credit report attractive to lenders and creditors. A lender and a creditor is not going to like to see something was settled because it's like, why? If you don't want that on your credit report, then I highly suggest that you contact the credit bureaus and see if they're able to get it off. A lot of times they will work with you at getting it off, and most times you can even do it online. You could do it over the phone. It's not necessarily this long drawn out process, especially if there's no balance attached to it. So really just having and using your voice can change a lot when it comes to your credit report. But typically what stays on is going to be the account itself and then the status. So paid, settled. Now if it just says paid, then that's fine.
That'll probably be maybe beneficial to your score, right?
Correct, unless there's late payments recorded. Sometimes that gets reported on there. Sometimes the payments don't. It just all depends on how they submit it. But if the lates are on there, then you definitely want to try to get that off.
And if it's a settled debt, do you know about how many points it might affect your credit score?
Everybody's different. So if it's settled and if let's say it's an installment, because okay, so your credit report it consists of five different categories, and one of the categories is credit mix. So you have to have revolving and installment on your credit report. So you don't want to just show that you have only credit cards. You don't want to just show you only have loans. So installment is anything with an end date. Revolving is anything that keeps on going. So that's going to be a credit card or like a credit line. So if for whatever reason, let's say the account that closes an installment and you have no other personal loans or auto loans or student loans on your credit report, then you're going to lose points because of that. But if you have other things that can suffice for that, then you'll be fine. But so it all depends on the person's credit report because some people do like they'll be surprised their score drops when they pay off their auto loan, and that's because they don't have any other installment, anything else with an end date. So it all depends on your credit report, but again, it's 2025, so you can get on an app and get something that will report, and it's like $5 a month just to hit that bucket.
And that'll tell you like what your current score is. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it will tell you, like, let's say if your score drops because something's paid off or something's settled, that's because sometimes you lose points because you're missing that bucket now.
Mhm.
But if that's the case, then you can go ahead and just get like like a self-reporting app that can kind of carry that gap right there. But everybody's report is different, so it's kind of hard to say how many points it will drop. But if you don't have anything else on your credit report and that closes out, it can drop drastically. It could drop anywhere from 10 to 50, sometimes how depending on how lengthy your credit is, sometimes even 100 points.
Gotcha. Okay, well, it sounds like there are a lot of factors that play into your credit score. And so, yes, a debt settlement, since your debt was forgiven, it will probably, for the most part, have like a negative effect on your credit score.
Mhm.
But in general, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mel, but in general, if you settle your debt, it's going to be a better situation for your score than if you just continue to not pay anything at all, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Having something settled on your credit report or even paid for a lesser amount is way better than just leaving it on your credit report and having an open balance on there.
Okay, perfect. And then last question before we jump into our live chat and questions that were submitted before the show started. My question is, once you do have a debt settlement on your credit report, about how long will it remain there before it drops off?
So if you actually have it and you don't do anything, it typically is 7 years from the open date
Okay.
before it, I mean, I'm sorry, 7 years from the close date. 7 years from the close date is when it will drop off. So if it closed in 2020, 2027 is when it's going to drop off.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and jump into some questions from the live chat and other submissions. We're going to start with a question from Sartorial Solutions, and I'll just read it out loud. It says, is there a way to get credit card companies to stop charging you interest on a credit card that they closed? The card would be paid off by now. I don't mind paying the base debt.
You would have to ask them, but usually, even if the card is closed and they have not, if there's no new transactions, they shouldn't be charging you interest. That's different. I've never heard of getting interest on something that's closed. Maybe if it just closed, maybe it's still, coming in. But if it's something that's been closed and it's been months now and they're still charging you interest, you should not be getting charged any interest if there are not any new transactions. You only get charged interest on the new purchases of that balance, if that makes sense. So I would definitely call them. I've never actually heard of that. I don't, did they state who the creditor is?
Sartorial Solutions, if you're still watching and you want to drop in the chat who the original creditor was that's charging you this interest, let us know and we can answer the question better. I would also add to your answer, Mel, and just say that that's kind of how banks are designed. Like that's how banks make money often is by charging interest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's like really important to stay on top of your balance to avoid accruing interest and then having to pay more than you originally borrowed. So if you've gotten to a point where you got so behind on your payments that now you're just like racking up interest, if you can prove to the bank that you have reason to have fallen behind on your payments, like maybe you had some sort of life circumstance, maybe you got sick, maybe you were going through a divorce, maybe you had an injury or lost your job for whatever reason. There are options you can discuss with the bank and tell them what's happening, why you fell behind on your payments, and they might be able to help you like set up a new payment plan to where you're also paying down on the debt, even if you are still paying a little bit towards the interest. But I think, again, like we talked about before, the key is to communicate and be proactive. Like, don't wait for them to come and collect the debt. And then that's credit score. Don't wait for them to sue you. You can be proactive and bite the bullet and try to find a solution now before it gets to like a legal situation. So.
Absolutely. Definitely use your voice and see if you can negotiate.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, the next question is from Shirley Stargazer. It says, I'm being sued by a debt buyer. What percentage of the debt should I negotiate?
I think that would be more of a you question.
I think so, yeah. So Shirley, that's a great question. It's a question we get a lot here at Solo. And the answer is pretty simple. Debt buyers usually purchase debts for a discounted rate from original creditors. So usually they will pay like pennies on the dollar to have the ownership of the debt transferred over to them so that then they will have the legal right to collect it. A study done several years ago said that the average price that debt buyers pay for such debts is 4 cents per dollar. So like literally that means they pay 4% of whatever the debt amount is. So they're paying like a few bucks if you owe $100, like they're paying very, very little to take ownership of this debt and then come after you for it. So while if it's gotten to the point where a debt buyer has purchased your debt, like it might be kind of tricky to negotiate with them because they have like set limits that they have predetermined before they even call you about the debt. They will have like a limit that says that they can't go past 50% to settle or X amount, right? But just know that you have leverage when you're working with the debt buyer because they probably purchased the debt for very little. So know that even if you were to settle for like 50%, for example, they're still probably going to make a profit. You're going to be able to settle for less than you originally owed. And it's kind of like a win-win situation, right? And it also depends on the debt buyer. So some major debt buyers may be willing to settle for even less. There's a lot of factors that play into it. But to give you kind of a generalized answer, And also, as a disclaimer before I give this answer, I'm not an attorney and this is not legal advice. This is just information that I can provide based on my experiences with talking with lawyers and people who negotiate debt for a living. Um, I would say typically, if you start with somewhere between 40 to 60%, you're going to have a really good chance at like settling for about that much. Um, Again, there's a lot of factors that play into it. Like if they know that you actually have the funds to pay it off, they might not um, they might not settle for as little as 40%. But if you start a little bit lower, it'll give you some room to grow and continue to negotiate and maybe still end up saving quite a bit once you reach that final agreement. So hopefully that answers your question, Shirley. Um, let's see. I wanted to ask you some questions, Mel, that we got prior to going live. One is from Hiram in Texas. It says, "Can a debt collector report your debt twice on your credit report?"
They should not.
They can-
Twice, same debt? No, that's an error. You gotta get that corrected ASAP.
Do you have any advice on how they could correct that?
So if it is reporting to all three bureaus, you're going to contact all three bureaus and they'll be able to see it. They'll be able to see, oh, wow, it is being reported twice. And they should be able to do it immediately. I don't see why they wouldn't do it immediately. Even if they do it immediately, sometimes it takes 30 days to update, or they may tell you that you need to send in a dispute, but they'll give you the actual verbiage because they may need your signature and your ID and a copy of your social. So it all depends. Some people, I don't know what it is, but some people have to send in extra documentation. Some people don't. You can just do it over the phone. But I guess it's whatever their system is telling them that they need to do. But you have to contact each bureau that's reporting. So sometimes that debt, like I have seen it before, it's a double. But let's say it's only reporting on Experian. Like you have the debt on all three, and then there's another one that's reporting on Experian. So just make sure you contact the ones that it's reporting. So typically it's like one or two, but I've never seen a double, like exactly one account is reporting and then on all three bureaus, and then another account exactly the same is reporting on all three bureaus, same account number, same balance, same everything. That is an actual error. And errors do happen sometimes.
Perfect. Yeah. So, short answer to that question, no, they can't report the same debt twice. Love it. Next question is from Mina in California. It says, "I was sued by Cavalry, and after they failed to appear on two separate court dates, the judge dismissed the case. How do I work to remove this from my credit report, or will they stop reporting it to the credit bureaus?"
They will stop reporting it after a certain amount of time. Typically takes 7 years from the close date. I don't recommend waiting that long, but if it's closed and it's already settled, I would contact the bureaus and have dispute it with them. You can even do it online. I find more success doing it by letter or phone, but you can try it online at the very least. And there's an option online that says already settled. Like when you're selecting the options, you're gonna log onto all three bureaus and you're going to select that option if you do it online. If you're doing it by letter, you're going to pretty much write that verbiage. And if you're doing it over the phone, you're going to say the same thing. So, yeah, just let them know that it's already been settled.
Perfect. And what kind of documentation might they have to submit in order to dispute that? Like, would they need to submit the court documents that prove that the case was dismissed?
Typically not. If they ask for it, you can, but typically you don't. You can send it, to be proactive, but most times they do not, especially if it's something that was settled. Now, if there's a balance still open, then yes, like you have to send that documentation because then that's a conflict. You're saying it's settled, but the report is saying it's open to have that proof. But if it's showing that it's closed, then you don't have to. But if you have the documents, go ahead and send that with you. Send it with your dispute.
Yeah, I'm sure it wouldn't hurt, right?
No, absolutely not. It wouldn't hurt.
Awesome. Okay, next question is from BJ in New Jersey. It says, "My lawyer settled a debt for me and I'm happy about it. However, I do not know how it will appear on my credit report in the future. What do I do now? I might have a few more settlements and don't want to injure my credit for years to come."
It might show up on your credit. I'm gonna just give you the hard truth. It may show up on your credit. I don't know how much it would drop your credit because it all depends on how lengthy your credit is, how heavy or how light your credit is. Because some people, it may affect them just a little bit, but then if you don't have much on your credit report, one thing can really hurt your credit report. So it all depends on how thick or thin your file is. That's what we say. And it is going to affect your credit. Not, it could be something that's 10 points. It could be something that's 50, 60, 70, maybe even 100 points.
Yeah, but it sounds like, again, we mentioned this earlier. Typically, settling is going to look better than
Absolutely.
delinquent.
Yeah, absolutely. Settling is going to always look better than it being open.
Yeah. So congratulations to you for settling the debt. That's great news. Um, yeah. Let's see. Next question is from David in Florida. He says, "How does a stipulated judgment impact you and your credit score? Is it worthwhile to go into, or is it best to negotiate not entering into one?" So, just to give a little context on what a stipulated judgment means, if you've been sued for debt, let's say like a debt collector sued you and you negotiate with them after the lawsuit's been filed and you come to an agreement that you will pay a certain amount and you'll settle for less and they agree to accept that to settle. In many states they will have to file a document into the court called a stipulated judgment, which is basically where they outline the settlement agreement that you came to, and it's technically considered like a judgment in the case, but a stipulated judgment is kind of like another way to say like your debt settlement agreement document. Um, and so, yeah, again, the question is, how does the stipulated judgment impact your credit score? And is it worth going into a stipulated judgment, or should you negotiate without entering one?
Should you negotiate without entering one? I'm not sure exactly how to answer that because I don't want to give the wrong information. Um, as far as like, I don't know really how to answer that, to be honest. I just don't want to give the wrong information.
Yeah, so I would take a stab at it. And again, this is not legal advice. This is just general information about debt and settling. But in most cases, it's really good to like get documentation that you've come to an agreement to settle the debt. This will help you avoid issues in the future. Um, Mel, do you have any information on if like a judgment like a debt collection judgment and would
Mhm.
show up on your credit report? Do you know what kind of an impact it could have on your report?
Yeah, judgments, because they show up as public records, they do impact your credit a lot. Um, it can always be disputed, though. I see judgments come off all the time. I see bankruptcies come off, so it can be disputed, but it is something that will you would have to constantly work at. So you would have to send in you're basically sending in a letter asking for validation. If they can't validate it, that's how you get it off. So it's not that, you know, it's a little bit different. You're basically hoping they don't send the validation. So
Hmm.
that way, you're hoping that they don't meet it in 30 days. So you want to just basically keep going at it. So that way, at some point, they miss the deadline, and that's how you get that's how you get it deleted.
But it sounds like, short answer, a judgment will have a negative impact on your credit score. Um,
Yes.
but I would like to just reemphasize that it's probably in your best interest to like get documentation that the debt was settled, and make sure that it's filed with the court case. This will help you avoid issues in the future. So it's kind of like there are pros and cons to entering a stipulated judgment agreement. Let's see. We're already over time, but Mel, if you're okay to go like another few minutes, we have a few more questions. Is that all
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Okay, let's see. We've got a question in the chat from Julie. It says Cavalry keeps reporting on my credit report, even though I'm uncollectible due to being disabled. I have a letter from them for proof of where they bought the debt, but blacked out. What can I do?
So Calvary keeps reporting on my credit report, even though I'm uncollectible doing. Okay, so have you contacted the bureaus and sent your documentation to the bureaus because they're the ones that are reporting it? If Calvary has you guys have this understanding and they're telling you that you have to communicate this with the bureaus. So you're going to have to contact whoever's reporting it, which it may be all three. You're going to contact TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax if it's reporting on all three, and let them know the situation, because they're just an agency that reports.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would also add to that, like, even if they can't collect your debt, like, even if they can't bother you about it because maybe you don't have any income that they can legally collect, maybe they probably can't sue you if that's the situation. And even if they did sue you and won the case, there's a chance that they probably still couldn't get your money legally. But even the point I'm trying to make is, like, if you are uncollectible because you're disabled and that's the only income that you have is like Social Security income, I believe that they can still report it to your
Mm-hmm.
score. Like, it can still appear on your credit. And if you do owe the debt and it is valid, there's probably not much that you can do about it. But if it's incorrect, if the amount's incorrect, like, definitely follow Mel's advice and dispute it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely send it to the credit bureaus. It doesn't hurt. But yes, exactly what Hannah said. Just because it's uncollectible and you have a letter stating that you're disabled, doesn't mean that they can't report. I want to be very straight about that. But it's still worth it to contact them if you're worried about your credit. It does not hurt.
Awesome. Okay, we've got another question from Vicky Tolbert on the chat. It says, if I make a settlement, can I make payments on the settlement? I'll take this one, if that's all right, Mel. Yes, the answer is you can make a settlement agreement to where you are on a payment plan. Um, in some cases, it might be like in your best interest to negotiate a lump sum payment, which is where you pay like 50% all at once. But in many cases, it might be in your best interest to set up like a payment plan to where you say, hey, can you knock off maybe 20% of the debt? And we'll come to an agreement that I'll pay $500 a month until that full amount is paid off. Yes, you can definitely do that. I'm seeing in the chat that TM says that they also have done that as well. So yes, you can settle and get on a payment plan. You just have to, like, probably in many cases, you would have to like prove that that's the ideal amount that you could afford to pay. And you might have to submit some like financial information to the collector proving that that's how much you can afford. And then you can enter into that payment agreement. But that's actually like a pretty good deal if you can get on a payment, like an installment plan and a payment plan with a collector. It's just a great way to like get back on track and eventually rebuild your credit. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Let's see. I'm going to ask one more question. Let's see. We'll go to the chat for this one again. All right. This question is from TM. It says, Holstead Financial has 5 accounts and is offering me 20% discount. What is your experience with them? I'm hoping to negotiate before a lawsuit is filed. Okay, so I believe we have, let's see,
Financial.
typing into the, okay, so we do have a blog post on solosuit.com specifically about Holstead Financial. So I'm going to go ahead and share that here. Solosuit.com/post/beat Holstead Financial Services. So let's see. Holstead Financial is a third-party debt collector. For a debt collection agency, Holstead actually has like really good reviews, meaning they are willing to work with you to get an agreement. And it sounds like already they've agreed to. It sounds like they've already agreed to accept a 20% discount on your debt, which is actually in some cases like a really good deal. So congrats to that. I'm not saying that it's not possible to like get a better deal. But I think like the key is to just be really open when you communicate with them. Like, tell them your situation. If you feel like 20% isn't really doable, maybe see if they could go a little lower. Submit your financial information to them to show them like what position you're in financially and what you can actually realistically afford to pay them. But yeah, I think the key is to just like really be open about your situation. And TM, again, you can go read our blog post that I shared. It'll give you more tips and tricks on like how to negotiate with Halstead Financial specifically, and who you would need to contact in order to start that negotiation process. Do you have any thoughts on that question, Mel?
No, I think you covered all of it. I actually am shocked to hear that is they're a good they're good because most agencies are like rated bad, so that's great.
Yeah, I'm looking on our blog post right now. It says that Holstead Financial has 1,000 Google reviews and they have like a 4.9 average star rating. So
That's great.
yeah, and then their Better Business Bureau reviews are also like a 4.43 out of 5 stars. So they will work with you, but it may take some work on your end to negotiate. And again, like you'll have to be super duper honest and upfront about your situation. And yeah, you should be able to at least. It sounds like you've already agreed to settle for 80% of the debt. Maybe you could do even more though.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think that's all of our questions of the night. Let's see.
Yes.
I just triggered my Siri, so sorry. My Siri was trying to talk to me on my laptop. But anyway, that's all of our questions. I triggered it again, y'all. That's all our questions for the night. Thank you so much, Mel, for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you,
really appreciate you sharing your expertise. Do you have any last words for, advice on what to do to like get a debt settlement removed from your credit report, or how to build your credit in general? Any other last words or advice?
To really settle a debt. Is that what your question is? To settle your debt?
To settle your debt and also to like improve your credit after you have settled.
My computer it went out, so I didn't hear the last. So to settle your debt, I would highly suggest basically just getting on the phone and using your voice and telling them your honest and true situation. Like, hey, this is what I can pay, and see what they are willing to do. If for whatever reason you need help, if you do get a summons and that debt is not settled and they happen to take further action, then contact Solo Suit so they can help you write that summons, and then you can settle it. You have another opportunity to settle that debt. And then when it comes to building your credit back up, really you want to start with just pulling a credit report and looking at it. A lot of times there's addresses, phone numbers, employers, stuff that really does not belong on your credit report. 70% of credit reports have errors. So there's stuff on there where you might have good credit, but people are still getting declined, but they have a bunch of personal information. So they got a bunch of addresses, phone numbers, employers. That hurts your stability factor. That's easy to clean up. If you're someone who needs to build credit, you can literally go to your app store and put in the word credit, and there's so many credit building apps. You don't have a traditional banking route like putting money on a secured card and trying to build credit that way. You can get an app and pay like $8 a month. Some of them are free. There's so many resources now to get credit. So really it starts with pulling a credit report and seeing exactly what is on your credit report. Anything that says collection, anything that says derogatory, anything that says late on there, you already know that needs to be corrected, modified, settled, disputed. However you want to attack it, that's what needs to happen to those accounts.
Yes. And I'm also going to drop a link here in the live chat. Head on over to solosuit.com. If you've been sued by a debt collector or a bank, you can use SoloSuit to respond to the lawsuit, which will block a default judgment. That's like going to be your first step if you're dealing with a lawsuit. But you can also use our tool called Solo Settle to negotiate with creditors and debt collectors and settle your debt for less, save money, and kind of get back on track to where you can rebuild your credit and achieve financial freedom. So I just shared a link to where you can click on it and go directly to our website and get started with that process. And then lastly, I also wanted to announce that currently we are hosting a giveaway at Solo. It's Solo's debt payoff giveaway. We are going to pay up to $4,700 on someone's debt. So I'm going to send a link in the chat as well. It is get.solosuit.com/giveaway. So if you want to click on that link, you can enter the giveaway and it's free to enter. All you have to do is answer like 2 or 3 questions. And we will select one winner to receive $4,700 to help pay their debt. So that could also be a great way to rebuild your credit. If you're facing a debt issue, we could help you pay off your debt and get back on track. So go ahead and enter that giveaway. And yeah, we're really excited to give back. We recently celebrated our 7th year anniversary as a company. So Solo turned 7 on Sunday, and to celebrate, we wanted to give back and pay off someone's debt. So go ahead, enter Solo's debt payoff giveaway. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can also contact us at support@solosuit.com. Mel, where can people contact you?
You can contact me on my website, streetfinancial.net. If you have any questions, I have a submission box. And there's also a chat. The chat just goes to my submission box if for whatever reason I'm not on the actual website. But you can always ask a question there if you have any questions. And I typically respond within 24 hours.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Mel, for joining. Thanks everybody for watching, submitting your questions. We really appreciate it. And just know that we're rooting for you at Solo. We want to help you find the debt resolution option possible. So please contact us. Head over to solosuit.com to learn more. Thanks again, Mel, for joining. And with that, we're going to sign off.
All right. It was my pleasure.